people, I'm Allie.
And I'm Lizzie, and we're the Photo Sisters.
And today we're going to be showing you part 3 of how to use your camera in manual. Today we're going to focus on
shutter speed.
Shutter speed.
Your shutter speed essentially controls the exposure of your image. It does work with ISO and aperture, but essentially if you have a slower shutter speed, like 1/80, your shutter is going to be open longer, therefore allowing more light to come into the shutter and record that light on the picture. So here's our light meter. You'll see your light meter when you look into the viewfinder of your camera. It's on the bottom. Can you see it, Allie?
Look now. Oh,
You'll
there
see.
it is. Wait.
You'll see your light meter.
You might have to press down your shutter button in order to see it.
But you'll see your light
Got
meter
it.
down there.
You see it?
And your light meter
there's
is
a ticker.
your light meter is going to help you with the exposure of your image. And essentially what this light meter is, in the very middle, that's what your camera thinks is properly exposed. On the right side, on a Canon camera, it's going to show the overexposed, or the brighter half, and the left side is going to be underexposed, or the darker half. Now if you're using a Nikon, those are flip-flopped for some reason. I don't know why, because it seems counterintuitive. But anyways, just, become familiar with your camera and know that one side means it's overexposed and the other side means it's underexposed. And somewhere in the middle is what they consider properly exposed. So every time you change your shutter speed, you're going to move this little wheel on your camera, or you might have a wheel back here too, in the back where your thumb is. But you're going to turn that, and you're going to see a little ticker, like Allie's finger right now. And that's going to change where your ticker lies by doing this, and you'll also notice that it will change the shutter speed number, and we'll get to that in just a second.
So if you've never done that before, go ahead and play with it now. But let me give you a tip. As a beginning photographer, don't be scared if you can't find it. Sometimes I can't find it because it's like 7 years too far over this way.
Or
so it
like
takes
you'll
a
move
lot,
it and you won't see it move.
A lot of turning, maybe like 40 or 50 turns of that dial just to get it back.
Yeah.
So don't be scared if you don't have a ticker. You really do. It's just lost.
It's lost, yep. Because it only goes as far as the screen lets it go. It might be, like she said, 7 years that way, and it'll take a lot of clicking for it to get back there where you can actually see it start moving.
And then if your screen says bulb, you're really in trouble because you're going to get like finger workout getting it back.
Yeah. Also, if you notice that your shutter speed isn't moving, like if you actually see the number not moving and it not allowing your ticker to move anymore, that means that you're at the minimum or the maximum shutter speed that it goes. Some cameras go to 1/4000, some cameras go to 1/8000. It just depends on your camera model. But if you keep moving your shutter speed and it's still too overexposed, then that means you need to stop down your aperture, go to a larger aperture number, so that you can get your shutter speed to start going down into territory, or decreasing your ISO as well. But essentially, your shutter speed, what the number is it's the amount of time that your shutter is open, and therefore if you have a slower shutter speed or a lower number, less light is recorded in the image. If your shutter speed is very fast, it captures less light, and it also captures action really fast. So you want to have a faster shutter speed or a higher number if you're covering anything that's action related, whether it's sports or trying to capture a jump midair, because the longer your shutter speed is open, that allows your subject to move and therefore can cause some blur or even handshake just, from the action of pressing your button. So really quick, I want you to listen to what a fast shutter speed sounds like. I'm going to put my shutter speed to 1/1250, and you can listen to it here. That took pretty quickly. Now I'm going to slow my shutter speed down to a lower number. This is 1/4, and listen to it now. Did you see how long it took for that to go? So obviously if my shutter speed is so slow like that, it's going to cause a lot of blur. You're not going to get those tack sharp images because it gives too much time for your subject to move, or even your hand to move and capture any of that little tiny movement. So as a general rule of thumb, if I'm shooting portraits, I try to keep my shutter speed at least 125 or faster, or a higher number, so that I don't get any motion, you know, blur going on or anything like that. Unless, unless you're trying to go for a long exposure and put your camera on a tripod, then you can put your camera on a tripod and, you know, allow that motion to happen, but that's a whole different technique that we'll get into. So if you're shooting portraits or just random inanimate objects, you're going to try to keep your number at 1/125. And sometimes you'll just see the 125 number. Sometimes you don't actually see the fraction. You'll just see the number there. And
it's right, if you look at your meter, it's usually right about here.
Yep, so you'll see a number over there. You'll see your shutter speed number. This is the 5D. I see my shutter speed number, and then I see my aperture, and then I see my light meter. So when I'm testing, when I'm trying to take pictures, what I do is I set my ISO, then I set my aperture, then I move my shutter speed around until I get it kind of towards the middle. Sometimes I do a couple ticks overexpose because I like my images on the slightly brighter side, and then I like to take a picture and see how it goes. Now if I'm still too dark, if I take a picture and it's still too dark, then what I need to do is increase my ISO or make my aperture wider, or a combination of the two, or I can also slow down my shutter speed to a lower number. But once I know that I get to 125, then I don't like to go lower than that, so I know I need to increase my ISO and or make my aperture wider to be able to shoot without any motion blur.
Now, shutter speed is something that you might have to change quite frequently while you're shooting.
Yep.
While you're shooting. You're not really going to have to change your ISO too frequently. You might not have to change your aperture too frequently. You might. It's a personal preference.
Yep.
But shutter speed is something you might have to change as much as
all
every
the time.
2 pictures. You might have to change it a lot.
It's, you know, just shooting from this direction to even moving over here completely changes the lighting scenario. So I'm constantly changing my shutter speed by doing this. And usually it's okay if I have, you know, a general area that the ISO and the aperture work. I usually don't have to worry about going below 125 or 1/25 of a second. So, you know, I usually don't have to worry about that too much, but I know that if I'm starting to lose a lot of light or if I'm moving away from a window, that's when I usually have to, you know, increase my ISO or make my aperture wider. But, you know, that's always something that has to happen as far as changing your shutter speed. And it really takes a lot of practice. It's a lot of trial and error. I'm not a super technical person, so I'm not like, it should always be at this number. So I'm always going by trial and error. I'm usually shooting on the overexposed side. That's just a personal preference. And if you're wanting to shoot with like backlighting and that sort of stuff, you're really going to need to overexpose your image. Otherwise, it'll start looking kind of like a silhouette if it's properly exposed, if the sun is behind them. So it just takes a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, a lot of clicking of this. But, you know, once you practice it and really get the hang of it, it'll be so much easier. If your picture is still too bright and your shutter speed is as fast as it can go, then you need to decrease your ISO to a lower number or stop your aperture down to a higher number. So if I'm shooting outside and it's really bright, I probably can't shoot at f1.4 just because once you have a wide aperture and a fast shutter speed, like you're going to have too much light still, like it's going to be light overload. So sometimes I have to, move my aperture to maybe f2.0 or f2.8 if I'm shooting outside and it's super bright out. But again, it just takes a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error. But the great thing with digital photography is they make really high capacity memory cards.
Yeah. So some homework for you. Right now, take your camera. First, you're going to set your
ISO.
Second, you're going to set your
aperture.
And third, play around with your shutter speed.
Yep.
Take a picture with it right in the middle. And then turn your dial a little and take a picture with it here.
Here's a good lesson for you.
Kind of play around a little bit just to see what happens.
Did you hear how long my shutter was just open for? If you see the inches sign after the number, that's seconds that your shutter is open. I accidentally, since I was playing around with this and not looking, I had my shutter open for 8 seconds. So that's why it was open for so long.
That would have been really cool on a tripod of maybe some cars driving by at
nighttime. But, that's a different technique. We can get into that later on. There's really great reasons for slow shutter speeds if you're going for a long exposure look. But if you're just shooting your kids or portraiture, or if you want to shoot your iPad laying around,
Or pictures of this.
Yep, our lovely cardboard light meter. You're going to want to do that. And also, if your camera goes to B, that's bulb, and it's going to open the shutter when you press the shutter, and it's not going to close your shutter till you press that. So that, you know, if your camera ever won't close the shutter, it might be on B for bulb. So that's also something to look for as well.
Up next, we're going to wrap up how to use your camera and manual. Don't forget to look at our past videos of how to use your camera and manual, ISO, aperture, and today's the shutter speed.
Thanks for watching, and go practice. Don't get frustrated. It takes a little bit of work.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.